This is the Capitol Rundown.
Should we light a candle and bow our heads? Goodness gracious. I mean, this is an incredible story.
The whole problem we have is that we can't defend ourselves because we don't have access to the qualified voter file.
In Michigan, it's particularly important because we were part of the dispute. The president kept making accusations about the Michigan vote.
It's all straight ahead. The Capitol Rundown starts now.
Good morning, and thanks for joining us for this week's edition of the Capitol Rundown. I'm Lauren Thompson. It's been another busy week in both Michigan's capital and in our nation's. We'll take you to Washington later in the show, but we start this week with the latest on the race for governor. The Capitol Rundown has a poll that shows how the Republican race to choose a candidate to take on Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer is shaping up. We helped sponsor this poll that asked 400 likely Republican voters who they plan to vote for in the primary on August 2nd. Here's what they said. Ryan Kelly leads the pack with 17%, and there's a tight race for second. Garrett Soldano has 13%. Kevin Rinke has 12%. Candidate Tudor Dixon is in fourth place with 5%, and Ralph Rebant got 1%. Taking a deeper dive into this, the poll started a week ago Friday, the day after candidate Ryan Kelly was arrested for his participation in the January 6th insurrection. He's been charged with 4 misdemeanors. It was big news across the state and the nation, and political experts said the arrest could actually help Kelly, at least in the Republican primary. Well, this poll could be evidence of that. On top of his lead, it shows that Kelly has some of the highest name recognition of any of the 5 candidates. The poll could be disappointing, though, for Tudor Dixon. She recently earned the support of the DeVos family, which includes a former candidate for governor in Dick DeVos and a former party chair and secretary of education in Betsy DeVos. Dixon also touted the recent endorsement of Right to Life Michigan. And then, unprompted by our pollster, 7% of those who responded said they planned to write in a candidate. Many of them could be referring to candidate James Craig. The former Detroit police chief and one-time self-proclaimed frontrunner was removed from the ballot after election officials invalidated thousands of signatures that he turned in, and that left him short of the number that he needed to qualify for the race. Now, Craig announced last Thursday night that he would run as a write-in candidate. He filed the paperwork to do that on Tuesday. Well, if you've done some of the math in your head, you may be wondering, why don't these numbers add up to 100%? And you'd be right. That's because all of the support for candidates only adds up to slightly more than half of those surveyed. A full 45% of those asked either refuse to say who they'll vote for or, more likely, don't know yet who they're voting for. And pollster Bernie Porn says that means this race is wide open.
Anybody's game. Whoever raised the most number of dollars to run TV ads, and who can figure out where their lane of opportunity is in terms of appealing to voters, they are the one that will likely win.
And still on the fence about his campaign for governor is Perry Johnson. He expects to decide whether to run as a write-in any day now. The millionaire and self-described quality guru asked a federal judge to stop the printing process and put his name on the ballot, even though he too was disqualified because he didn't have enough valid signatures filed. The judge said it was on the candidate, though, to make sure their petitions were valid. Johnson argued he couldn't do that because the state wouldn't let him look at the list of Michigan voters.
That's the whole point. We're not allowed to. I don't know how you can have any kind of justice if the actual judge doesn't realize that the whole problem we have is that we can't defend ourselves because we don't have access to the qualified voter file.
Well, it's not just the race for governor. There's also a congressional candidate who was removed from the ballot who now says he'll run as a write-in. Jake Hague collected more than 1,400 signatures to run for the new 7th District in the House of Representatives. That area includes Greater Lansing, but the Board of Elections invalidated about 500 of those signatures, most of them for technical reasons, leaving him about 50 short. But Hague, who describes himself as an America First Republican, says he isn't giving up in his race against current state senator Tom Barrett, the other Republican in the running.
And so even though I was illegitimately thrown off the Michigan ballot, I am not giving up. My fight continues as I'm announcing my Republican write-in campaign, and I will be the best voice to represent Michigan's 7th District, especially in the Republican primary, as I will go head-to-head with Alyssa Slotkin in the general.
Well, we're about to take a little break, but when we come back, we ask our Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic about his take on all those poll numbers, and we'll talk about where the campaigns go from here. Stay with us. The Capitol Rundown. We'll be right back. Welcome back. It was another exciting week in the race to be Michigan's next governor. We've told you about some surprising poll numbers and how some Republican candidates who didn't make the ballot just aren't giving up. Here now to break this all down for us are Jorma Duran and our Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic.
It's time to get updated politically here in the state of Michigan, and nobody better than this guy right here, Tim Skubic, to talk with. And Tim, we have some new polling numbers just released, really focused on the GOP, the candidates for governor, that type of thing. Very surprising on those results. What did you learn?
The winner is 45% undecided, which is a key number. If you think about it, many of these candidates are just now at this juncture getting into the running of TV commercials, and so their name ID is by definition very low, except in the political community, among those of us like you and I that follow this stuff. But the general public, right now, they're more concerned about making sure the cabin up north is clean and that the water is warm and that the kids are safe, you know, that sort of stuff. And they are definitely not focused on the August 2nd primary.
Tudor Dixon, 4th. That was surprising to me. How about you?
We still have a ways to go. She is going to get some money, we assume, from the DeVos people who have enough people in their family to fund 2 candidates for governor if they really wanted to. We'll see what they do vis-a-vis commercials for her and whether this moves her up in the polls at this juncture, though. She's stuck at 5% in way back in the field.
Well, the old school frontrunners, James Craig, Perry Johnson. What is the latest with those 2 men?
Shall we light a candle and bow our heads? Goodness gracious. I mean, this is an incredible story, and they're going to write about this in the future. James Craig courageously has announced that he's going to run a write-in campaign. Really tough. So he does get some mileage out of the write-in, but he's not going to probably get to enough to win this primary. So his role will basically be a spoiler. Mr. Johnson, Perry Johnson, on the other hand, lost in the courts to get on the ballot, and he is also considering, although he doesn't think it's likely, maybe was his word, that he might do a write-in. Or in the interview that we ran earlier this week, he also said, you know what? I'm thinking about going into Iowa and maybe running for president. So, you know what? If he can't be governor, maybe he can be president. The good news is he doesn't have to turn in petition signatures to do that.
Great stuff as always, Tim. It's always good to get updated by you. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. When we come back, we move from one capital to another. We head to Washington to talk about what happened in the January 6th committee hearings, and later, what's going to happen on gun control. So stay with us. The Capitol Rundown will be right back. We move now this morning from Michigan's capital to the nation's capital, where we heard 2 more days of testimony in front of the January 6th committee, which is looking into the attack on the U.S. Capitol in 2021. That attack was carried out by supporters of former President Donald Trump, who were convinced that he actually won the election. On Monday, the committee and the nation heard from top Trump officials who said the former president's theories and his claims of victory just didn't make sense.
I told him that it was crazy stuff.
What they were proposing, I thought was nuts.
Told him flat out that much of the information he's getting is false.
I thought, boy, if he really believes this stuff, he has, lost contact with he's become detached from reality.
The hearings picked up again on Thursday, and at those hearings, we learned more about Trump's efforts to overturn the election and the very real danger faced by Vice President Mike Pence. Nicole Killian now walks us through it all.
Our democracy came dangerously close to catastrophe.
The Select Committee investigating the Capitol attack said the events of January 6 were the culmination of a failed legal scheme to convince former Vice President Mike Pence to overturn the 2020 election.
It was illegal and unconstitutional.
The panel says it originated with a fringe theory promoted by conservative attorney John Eastman, suggesting the vice president had the power to reject electors and declare Trump the winner.
I know for a fact I heard both say that his theory was crazy.
I said, are you out of your effing mind?
This is constitutional mischief.
Despite repeatedly being told it wasn't possible, the committee says the former president continued to push the idea despite Pence's objections, resulting in an angry phone call on the morning of January 6th.
You'll be a wimp. Wimp is the word I remember.
The conversation was pretty heated.
I hope Mike is going to do the right thing.
Once the Capitol was breached, White House aides say the former president was notified but continued to tweet. Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done.
It felt like he was pouring gasoline on the fire.
Mike Pence has betrayed the United States of America!
The committee says that tweet put Pence's life in danger and revealed new photos of the underground location in the Capitol where he was evacuated.
That's all there was. 40 feet between the vice president and the mob.
I don't think I was aware that they were as close as that.
Even after the riot, when Pence returned to certify the election results, his advisor said he got another call from Eastman urging him not to.
That was certifiably crazy.
The committee says Eastman emailed Rudy Giuliani asking to be considered for a pardon. And when deposed by the panel this past December, Eastman took the fifth more than 100 times.
I assert my Fifth Amendment right against being compelled to be a witness against myself. Fifth.
The panel recently obtained new emails between Eastman and conservative activist Ginny Thomas, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Eastman says it was just about an election update. Thomas says she is willing to talk to the committee, which has now sent her a letter to do just that. Nicole Killian, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
Well, still to come, we certainly had a lot to digest over the 2 days of hearings. So an expert from Michigan State University helps break it all down for us. That's when the Capitol Rundown continues. Well, this week, the Rundown caught up with a political analyst from Michigan State University to get his biggest takeaways on what we've seen in the January 6th committee hearings so far. Take a listen. After a week of big-name testimony in Washington, D.C., experts are now weighing in on what was reportedly a major disagreement between President Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence.
The big effect that you get is just that there was an ongoing attempt up to and including January 6th to get the vice president to try to use his ceremonial power to open the electoral votes to send the election back to the states or to reject those electoral votes. And what's interesting is that we're hearing that from the vice president's staff. This was conveyed repeatedly by the vice president's office to Trump and to all lawyers working for Trump that the vice president did not believe that he had this power.
Now that the internal conflict between Trump and Pence has been laid out, political analyst Matt Grossman believes the committee hearings will focus on a new angle next.
More extreme elements in the crowd that actually entered the Capitol first. They're going to try to connect the dots between that and what was going on with the president's team. That's the connection that hasn't really been made yet.
And while to some this may seem like a lot of insider politics involved, Grossman says these hearings are important for all Americans, especially here at home.
I think in Michigan it's particularly important because we were part of the dispute. The president kept making accusations about the Michigan vote that did not turn out to be correct. And he kept trying to pressure Michigan legislators to do something to support his victory in the 2020 election without a basis. And we see that occurred up to and including January 6th.
Of course, the January 6th committee isn't the only thing happening in Washington right now. After years of gridlock and years of mass shootings, there may finally be some movement on the issue of gun control. We'll tell you all about the proposals and the reaction when the Capitol Rundown returns. We head back to Washington now, where we could be just days away from a landmark agreement on gun control. It also got a boost this week when Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said he might be on board. Congressional correspondent Nicole Killian joins us now again with the details on what's in the proposal and where things stand now.
Leader McConnell told reporters he is comfortable with this agreement and said if it holds, he will support the legislation. McConnell joins at least 10 other Senate Republicans who have already backed the framework. It boosts mental health and school safety funding, enhances background checks for gun buyers under 21, and provides financial incentives for states to pass red flag laws to remove guns from people who could pose a danger. Democratic and Republican negotiators are currently drafting the legislation and hope the bill can be finalized this week. Their goal is to hold a vote next week in the Senate before Congress recesses for the July 4th holiday.
Michigan U.S. Senator Gary Peters has expressed his support for the deal, adding that when it comes to reducing gun violence, quote, failure is not an option. He calls the proposal common sense legislation. And Michigan Democratic Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin also expressed her support for the bill. She says it does not do everything she would want, but when it comes to preventing gun violence in America, she thinks this proposal is a step in the right direction, which she says is better than nothing. The Capitol Rundown did reach out to 4 Michigan Republican congressmen to get their thoughts on everything from the gun control compromise to the January 6th hearing. None of them got back to us. Well, if you'd like to read about Michigan politics as well as watch it, sign up for our Capitol Rundown newsletter. It's just one email each week, and you can get it by pointing your cell phone camera at the screen right there. It will take you right to the sign-up page, or you can go to WLNS.com/newsletters. Well, that's our show for this week. Tune in next weekend to get in-depth and insight from Michigan and Washington right here on the Capitol Rundown. Thanks for watching.